This is Radio Fam. You're looking out for the radio family. So and that's why this resonates with a lot of people. It's a community for people that work in radio,
Yeah.
and not necessarily management. It's a voice for people that work in radio, and that's what I love about what you're doing. And just keep at it. It's amazing.
Thank you. I love it. Like, and honestly, just the fact that like people do notice it that aren't here in the US is like crazy to me. You know what I mean? That like people know of it. It's awesome.
Well deserved. We're a global family. My background was in media, so I had no intention of being in radio. Essentially, I'd done my bachelor's in media, and my only experience with radio at that point was early on. I think it was like freshman year. I did an internship. It was like a university radio. And that was my first experience. I never actually got on the radio. It was just writing. So right now I'm living in Qatar. And before then I was in New Zealand. So I've been back and forth between New Zealand and Qatar. And I've also lived in the States. So I moved back to New Zealand to finish my master's in media, film, and television. I never thought I could be on radio. And at that time I was just someone who studies media and is passionate about media and takes part in different media projects, whether it was student films, things like that. I was more focused on writing, like creating content. And I would listen to these amazing radio shows. Like one time I tuned into the radio and there was an interview with a rehabilitated arsonist. And I was like, okay, this is so good. And they were talking to him. Basically the whole idea was like, why did you do this? Why did you enjoy burning things down? And the message was, don't burn things down, folks. But he was just walking the audience through that process. And it was just so interesting. Like they would have these conversations. I was like, wow, this is amazing. I finished my studies, started interning in television. And then I moved back here and started interning in television, getting experience in a major network, doing interview producing. And that was really exciting, just getting experience, like booking guests, pre-interviews, preparing the presenters. And that gave me a lot of good skills. And as soon as I came here, I'd applied for the radio. And it wasn't until a year later that they called me and said, hey, we want to do a voice test. I was like, okay, that's exciting. I'm not sure what a voice test is. Yeah. And I show up and they're like, okay, this is how it's going to go. We're going to give you an hour to write a script, like a short script, and then you're going to record it.
So like a commercial?
No, not commercial, like a short, entertaining, informative. So it had to be entertaining, but also informative.
Okay.
So they gave me a computer. Okay, here you go. You have an hour. I'm like, crap, like, what do I do? They put me on the spot. I'm a curious person, so I go down these rabbit holes. And I was learning about, the avocado trade and how avocado, like there's a criminal element to avocados. There's the cartel that's involved in Mexico who tax, farmers, avocado farmers. And where I was living in New Zealand, there was a lot of like robberies. So the avocado prices spiked. I know it sounds ridiculous, but the avocado prices spiked and people are used to eating avocados over there. So the prices went up. So people started robbing trucks and there was farms that had to get security to protect their farms. Like avocado was the green gold. So I remembered that and I started writing about that, researching. I talked about the history and then the consequences on the environment and the criminal aspect of it. Then they're like, okay, now you're going to go record. This is the first time I'm going to record something for radio. And there's just a bunch of them outside the studio. Everyone's like looking at me through the glass. I'm just like, can you stop looking at me?
I'd be so nervous.
I hate it. So everyone's looking at me and I'm like, okay, at that point, you got to do what you got to do, right? So I just went for it. I recorded and we did 2 takes. They were like, okay, this is great. We'll have the manager look at it and then call you back. Okay, cool. I wasn't sure how it went, but apparently, he loved it. And yeah, they offered me a job. Essentially, it was supposed to be a permanent contract, but I was working like I was going to work with them as a freelancer for a little while. They were relaunching the radio and they wanted help with that.
Okay.
And I was working with them as a freelancer until my contract was done. Long story short, I never got that contract, right?
Oh.
I was a freelancer for over 2 years with them.
Oh, wow.
Which is part of the reason that I decided to move on. Among many things, you dream about being on the radio. You dream about being on television. You dream about actually working in media. But then you get there, and you realize that when you're a part of an institution, and there's management involved, and there's a bureaucracy, it really destroys that creative. You lose that creative freedom. So many experiences in the radio. I grew a lot. I learned a lot of skills. One thing that I decided to move on. I decided to move on from the radio about 4 or 5 months ago. Things weren't going so well during COVID, and we had salary cuts.
Oh, what were you doing? Like just a bunch of like a show, or a bunch of just different?
That's a good question. See, I completely skipped them. They were relaunching, and I've done a bunch. I've done everything. I've done co-hosting morning shows to this is my favorite thing, was interview shows. That's where I really found myself doing interviews, talking to different people. So I had a show called Guest of the Week, and then there was a show called Me, You, and Guest. I would find people from the community, whether they're entrepreneurs or artists or unique people with interesting stories, and I'd have them on the radio and interview them. That was my idea, actually. I was telling them, we need to, since it's a local station, and this is the power of radio, right?
Yeah.
Is our listenership is here, it's local. So we need to start giving them content that's relevant to them, talking to people in the community, highlighting events, highlighting things. I think that's what the power of radio is. It's to serve the listenership and the community. It's not, we don't have to pretend, we're a radio station in the US or somewhere else. No, we're a radio station that's based in Qatar, serving a listenership that's here, and that's something we should focus on and highlight. So once the mindset shifted, we started having these shows. I was interviewing people from the community. It started to gain traction. Eventually, management started to get involved, pushing certain guests that they wanted and taking control. You know how it is.
So it's the same over there as it is here.
Everywhere. There seems to be a theme when it comes to radio everywhere. Yeah, so I did that show. I did different news segments, reporting on events, literally everything. But the shows where I found myself was talking to people, interviews. And bear in mind, those were really short. I mean, those are short interviews. They're usually either 5 minutes or 10 minutes, depending on the show. And during COVID, they wanted engagement. So I was like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have an audio one for the radio, and then I'm going to have a video version, which I'm going to edit myself and put it on social media. I'm sure you've seen the video one. That was purely my idea. And so I got to do a lot of good stuff. I got a lot of skills over there. I mean, some people choose to specialize in one thing. One thing that I did, and I'm so glad that I did, was I tried to learn everything. So I had no experience when it comes to audio editing. I learned audio editing. I learned, obviously improved my interviewing skills, everything, interview producing skills, just using the system, live shows, everything. I tried to learn everything I could. And then those skills have finally, I've been able to adapt now for, my podcast, where I have my own creative freedom. So that's it in a nutshell. Storytelling is my passion. I've tried creative writing. It's always been trying to tell stories. I left by choice. I decided to move on, and I decided to focus on podcasting. And I've applied those skills. So I finally launched my podcast, which is called Curated Advice on Better Living. I was thinking about launching a podcast while I was on the radio. And I remember I was talking to one of my co-hosts, DJ Chloe, about the podcast, and in between the play the music on the show, we'd have little breaks, and we start talking about it. And she was like, well, when are you gonna launch this podcast? And I was just stuck in the creative phase for a long time. Like even the name, I got stuck in the name, because every time I think of something and it's brilliant, I'd go search it and I'm like, damn, somebody has already taken,
Oh, worst. Yeah. Uh-huh.
And it's like someone who's already who's put out like 3 episodes and they have been inactive like for 2 years. It's always something like
Oh,
that.
that's the worst.
Sometimes you need to kind of put yourself in those situations where, you have the motivation and the drive to do something. So I finally launched the podcast. Some of the first episode, I remember, so I have a friend of mine, Moby, and we decided to go to his farmhouse and we recorded the first episode in his farm. It was really good. We were talking about the creative process. Since then, I've been consistently putting out episodes every week, having amazing conversations. Some of the conversations I had are with people that I interviewed on the radio. This time we could go way more deeper and it's unfiltered. And I'm producing the podcast from A to Z. So it's my creative judgment. We can talk about this, we can talk about that. The conversations, I started off by putting the first episode out, it was like 30 minutes long, and then people were like, we want more, we want more, we want more.
Oh, wow.
And now the episodes are like an hour long, and people are enjoying that. The audience is enjoying that because you could really go deep. And we get to discuss all sorts of things. So yeah, I've had many conversations with guests that I've had on the radio, and other guests on all sorts of topics. But one thing that I tried to focus on, so they say if you have a podcast, you should have a niche or something to focus on. I didn't want to limit myself. I want to be able to talk to different people about different topics. So I called it Curated Advice on Better Living, because the underlying theme is living a better life. So all conversations at the end, I kind of tie it into that theme, and I always wrap every conversation with asking the guest, what's your advice on how to live a better life?
Oh,
and
like
it's amazing. Everybody has different answers. Some are practical, some are more spiritual, some are more philosophical. And I'm just collecting these, pieces of advice from everybody. And the audience enjoys it. And it's been amazing.
I'm always asking kind of people to like evaluate, like what makes them happy in life, and like what are the different things that you can change, the little things that are in your control. Because some people, that's the big thing, is like not putting all your value in like your radio job or whatever, because then you lose that and then you have nothing. So it's like, what are the other pieces? And I always think it's interesting too, what people value differently. Everybody's so different in what makes them happy.
Yeah, you touched on something that's important. A lot of people base their identity on their jobs or on external factors, which we often don't have control over, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's this whole theory of, are you a compulsive reactor? Are you compulsively reacting to things, external things? I mean, I'm talking about messages or losing a job, or someone saying something or looking at you the wrong way, or someone cutting you off in traffic, or waking up on the wrong side of bed. There's just constantly these external factors that influence us, and we become compulsive reactors where we react.
Yeah.
Just by having these conversations with guests, some of them share all sorts of things. Some of them share advice that's more practical, like whether it's, exercise is a big one, right? Or being around nature, or some of them are more focused on personal boundaries, protecting your energy. That's a really important thing.
Yeah.
Some people would focus on more philosophical things. It's just each guest is unique. Mm-hmm. Each one of them has been through their own personal experiences. And I try to encourage that, by the way. I try to encourage people to talk about their mistakes, regrets, things they've done wrong, things they've done right, what we've learned about that, because I'm trying to serve the audience. And I'm also, I also enjoy the conversations. I learn a lot from them. I'm not just having the conversations, I'm editing them. Then when they're out, I listen to them. So I'm constantly shifting these little hats, whether it's me being an interviewer like you're doing now, and then you're going to shift the hat and, become an editor. And then you can put the hat of a listener on, which is, I think, the most fun, right? Where there's no strings attached. It's just, you get to enjoy it. But
yeah,
it's been brilliant. It's been brilliant. Like, you don't need the radio to do that. That's what a lot of people don't understand. And I see this with some of my colleagues in radio who have been in radio for a very long time. Very talented people. I respect them so much, but it's hard for them to move on
It is.
from the radio, even if they're not happy, even if management is taking advantage of them. And that seems to be a theme around the world when it comes to radio, right?
Yes.
They're struggling to move on. So what you're doing is amazing. You're supporting the radio community. You're highlighting that. You're sharing, you're reposting the content.
So if you had started the podcast while you were still working there, would they want to have like their hands on it?
I'm not sure, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Sure.
Because there is that mentality of, oh, you work for us. You're in the radio. Everything you do outside the radio, anything that's creative, belongs to us. And you even need permission to do, for example, if I want to do voiceover gigs on the side, you need to get special permission and things signed. It's a whole process. And this is what I love about podcasting. This is why podcasting is powerful. And when I mentioned podcasting in front of some of my, former colleagues, they felt threatened.
Oh.
They felt threatened, and that's the wrong mentality. You see, even though I was in radio, I didn't feel threatened. I saw it as an opportunity because it's perfect. Radio, you have radio skills. You can apply that to podcasting. Podcasting is decentralized, as in, like you mentioned, there is no middleman. There is no network. Like being on radio it seemed so impossible for so many people. Even for myself, I've always, in the back of my mind, always wanted to be on radio, but I never thought it was possible until I actually did it. Obviously, there's the voice, there's a bunch of other aspects, and there's luck as well, right timing. I applied a long time ago, and the opportunity came. They were relaunching, blah, blah, blah. Things fell into place. So there's a lot of talented people out there. So with podcasting, anybody can find their voice. So that's why I called the workshop How to Start a Podcast, Finding Your Voice. And it was about empowering people, regardless of where you're from, your background, your sexuality. There's an audience out there for you. And it doesn't matter like how small that audience is. If you are a parent of a child that has a specific condition or disability, there are other people that have children like that. And so by creating a podcast, you're reaching that community. You're making people feel like they're not alone. And that's the beauty of podcasting. Anybody can start a podcast. If you figure out your why and what, things will fall into place. So first thing is, why do you want to start a podcast? And you need to answer that honestly. And the answer could just be for fun. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that removes the pressure from you trying to get a certain amount of views, right? Trying to get I need this many downloads and views to get ads. And no, if you're doing it for fun, then even you don't even have to put out content every single week.
I
You
agree.
could put out content whatever, once a month, whatever. It's a hobby, it's a passion, you're having fun with it. So you can use it for that, or you can try to pursue it professionally, like with my podcast. For me, it's a space, first and foremost, to have creative freedom and have conversations with people. But of course, down the line, if it's something that I can monetize somehow, that would be amazing. I have to be completely open about that, because that would be a dream. That means I wouldn't have to do all these other jobs. And before we did, this is why I cut a bit out of breath. I just recorded a voiceover before I came here, and it was a 9-page script. They didn't tell me. I got the script like 20 minutes before I show up. Yeah, 9-page script. It was just, you have to be flexible. You have to just kind of, get on with it, right? And I would go and do those voiceover jobs. That's how I'm getting by right now, after leaving the radio. Voiceover jobs. I did the workshop. Workshop is something I want to focus on.
Yeah, tell me a little more about that.
It was for VCU University, Virginia Commonwealth University. Okay. They have a branch campus over here. It's an art school here. So it's open to creativity, and they have this event, which is amazing. So much respect for them for hosting this event. It's called Tasmim, Radical Futures, and it's all about the future. It's all about whether it's the metaverse or rethinking the way we consume things, or clothing and sustainability. It's all about rethinking and imagining the future. And so, podcasting being decentralized, kind of fits into that as giving people a voice. And so it was a 2-day in-person workshop.
Was it like a bunch of students or like adults too?
It was all students except for 2 professors that were there that attended. Yeah. So the rest of it was just students in the university. There was about 15 students, and that was the maximum capacity because of COVID that we were allowed. Yeah. And bear in mind, this was my first workshop. So it was a It was a great experience.
Yeah, the fact I'd be so nervous. Like I tried to do an online one once and nobody was interested in it. So.
Oh yeah, nervous, of course. I mean, it's normal to feel a little nervous. I was a little nervous, but that and also excited and in general, and I'm sure you feel the same way. I mean, you're interviewing me right now. You're having me on a podcast.
Yeah.
Like I have the ability to kind of work on the spot. So, the way I divided it was we went through the worksheet. The first day was creative process. So they have all these questions and exercises they have to go through.
Okay.
And then after they're done, obviously I'd present some content and share some information. Then they would think about that. And then each section they would discuss it with their groups. And then I would go around to every table and talk to them, see how they're doing. And then later we'd have like a group, like a class discussion. And I did like a Q&A. And it was it's a great process. Two things I really enjoyed the second day. I did a Q&A where they could just ask me anything. And I answered as honestly and as openly. And they loved it about podcasting, the good, the bad, the mistakes, everything. I just answered, from the heart, really. And they loved it. And some of them would ask 4 questions at a time. And I'm like, slow down, like I'm trying to process everything 1 question at a time. It's like 4 questions in one.
Yeah.
But it was the moment where they actually got to record, that their eyes lit up. They were enjoying, there's a big mixer, right? And, I plugged in 2 mics, had both of them start a conversation, and one of them just put the headphones in and just play with the sound, like the input volume. And they're having a discussion, and then I'd add another mic, and then someone would join, and then a 4th mic. Suddenly there's 4 people on a mic, and they're having a conversation about cats. And it's super random, and this person that's listening, and then I'm shifting people around. And it's just to kind of break the ice, because I feel with a lot of things, podcasting included, you have to do it. Once you do it, it's no longer alien. It's no longer as scary. And I'm sure you've experienced that before, whether it's video editing, whatever new thing you got to do, just do it. And I went through the learning process. Yeah, I had all those skills in radio. But once I started a podcast, I didn't know anything about getting my podcast on all these different, like Apple, for example, was not easy to, get the podcast on, or everything from cover art to recording, technical difficulties, this and that. Just, it's a learning process, and there's so much work. Like the amount of bandwidth you need to create content, and this, I see you nodding your head. It's so much work, and people don't understand. Like at the end of the day, let's say you put out like let's say you put out an episode, an hour-long episode. The amount of work that goes into it. That's just, finding guests. You're booking guests, and then you're recording these conversations, right? And then after this, you're going to have to edit the conversation, and then you have to distribute it, and then you have to promote it. So there's so much work that goes into it, and it's only people that, that are creatives that do this kind of work that really appreciate the amount of work that goes into podcasting. I'm focused on building a community, and I know with Radio Fam, that's what you've done very well, actually, is build this whole community. And when you build that community, they are a part of the discussion. They give you feedback. They guide you. They suggest guests. Like I had another amazing guest who is, she's an actress, and she does all these plays, and they're focused on, so she's Albanian, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of these plays are linked to Albanian culture, and these incredible plays about dark topics like human trafficking and blood feuds and things like that. And like one of my friends reached out, and he was like, how do you find these guests?
Yeah.
And the truth is, I don't find these guests. They find me. Mm-hmm. And I know, I'm sure you experienced that, where someone reaches out, or someone's like, you need to talk to this person, or, oh, I know someone who can talk about this topic, or suddenly you're getting all these suggestions. And yeah, I have this one rule that I usually don't break unless I know the person. Is I always go out with the person for a conversation. In radio, I didn't do that. It was a phone conversation. But for the podcast, I go out with a person for a cup of coffee, tea, just have a casual conversation, get to know them, feel the chemistry, pick up on a few topics. And then when we have the conversation, I can navigate the conversation. I don't have any scripts or anything.
Oh, but I have
And like I can navigate. There's a story arc, there's a beginning, middle, and an end. When it's time to finish, I hit them with what's your advice on how to live a better life?
I like your creative process. I like when people talk through what they do because it's just interesting to me.
I know I'm a little bit all over the place.
Oh no, I am too.
You're a great interviewer, and I'm not usually this talkative because I'm usually the one interviewing people. So
right.
I'm asking the right questions, but this is an opposite kind of dynamic. So I'm the provider of content, and I'm going to share something interesting. But it will give you some insight into the radio that I worked in, right?
Yeah.
Like I said, I can't get into too many details, but there are employees that are hired to listen to the radio.
Like they pay people to like spy on you guys?
There's the other room where people are listening, and the reason that this is how we know that. If you make a mistake on air, you say the wrong thing, or if one time we had like dead air for a while, there's some technical difficulty, very short, someone just opened the door. What happened? And we're like, whoa, who are you? Like, we haven't seen you. And they're like in some little closet room. And so, when it comes to radio and it comes to media, it's all about who's funding the radio, right? Who's funding media is expensive, right? We all know that television, media, radio, it's an expensive operation. How I started to think about podcasting differently was when I first got into it. Yeah, it's a creative outlet, but I wanted to increase my downloads and audience because eventually I wanted, to generate revenue. But then I started to think, because of my podcast, I get to have these cool conversations. Because of my podcast, I get to talk to people who I usually wouldn't get an opportunity to talk to. But when you tell people, hey, I want to have you on a podcast, they're excited. So if it's like a CEO of a big company or some artists and stuff, you give them opportunity to talk about themselves and what they're doing. They're going to jump on that opportunity.
Yeah.
So, and so even for me, it's hard to keep up. I'm sure you have like a lot of podcasts that you're supposed to record, and it's hard to keep up, especially if you're doing all the work by yourself. Right. But it's an amazing opportunity.
Adding the podcast element to the Radio Fam brand has just done worlds for that. And I do agree with you that do the stuff for fun. And as I'm watching other people that are successful with these type of things, that's how it starts out. Like the ones that are fun, and then it eventually becomes fruitful for them. So I'm excited, like people like you that are doing something, to continue to watch the journey and see where it goes.
Just to give them a glimpse of radio outside of the US.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of voiceover jobs through the radio. I didn't get paid for them, but it was more like, oh, you work for the radio. The manager needs some favors, so here's some voiceover stuff. One of them in specific, and this was the one that inspired me to make my account on social media public.
Okay.
This is nobody. Most people don't know this story. This is a very exclusive. One of the not managers, but someone under the manager, and she has no experience in radio and doesn't really understand the creative people. She looks at radio from a completely different perspective. She sends me this short script on WhatsApp. And this is outside working hours. And she's like, listen, the manager needs you to record this as soon as possible. I don't know what it's for. I have no idea. It's something that's COVID related. So I'm like, I'm not even home. She's like, whatever, I need it quick. So I'm like, okay, this is wild. It gets really wild here. I recorded on my phone. I just literally one take, record on my phone, whatever, no biggie, send it to her. Not long after that, there's this video going around of this robot. For a period of time there were these robots going around the country, basically announcing like COVID restrictions, and they even have drones flying around. It was quite dystopian, very sci-fi. And my brother sends me the video and he's like, hey man, is that robot your voice? And I'm like, no, that can't be. And I start listening to it and I'm like, what the hell is going on? That was that thing I recorded on my phone and I sent to her.
Yeah.
Now my voice is on a robot that's going around the country.
So it was like the actual voice coming out of the robot.
That was the actual voice coming out of the robot with like special cameras scanning people, and that information would be used to like penalize people for COVID restrictions. I'm telling you, it was wild. And I saw that and I was I was in shock. I'm like, holy, like, damn, like that's my voice. Nobody told me.
Yeah.
Nobody, I didn't give permission to this. I didn't get paid for this. Like, I didn't know. I recorded that in my car. Someone was with me at the time. Like, they're a witness to this. On my phone, no biggie, whatever. It's just one of those things like, the manager's asking for some tasks. Fine. And I see that and I'm in shock. And then it goes viral. It goes viral everywhere. And nobody mentions my name. And all these pages are look at the COVID robot. And I'm like, what is going on? Nobody mentioned my name. And then I start reaching out to these pages. I'm like, hey guys, can you at least credit me? Like, sorry, we got this from, it was, I can't remember, the Ministry of Interior or something. Right? And so after that, I was really upset. And I was talking to that lady that I know from social media. And she was like, listen, you need to make a public account. You need to take credit for this. You need to start posting, And that's the moment that I realized that, if I don't post as a creative person, post and take credit from my work. So I made the video and I announced it like, hey guys, I'm excited to announce, like, obviously I didn't tell people how it went down, but I was like, I did the voice for the robot as if like I knew what it was for. I wanted to make the most out of that situation because there was nothing I could do. Yeah, so that's an exclusive story. Not many people know about that. A lot of my friends, a lot of people around me don't know that story, and it's an exclusive for radio fans.
I love that. So I think then a good way to end this one is then to ask you your own question, how you would give advice on better living.
Oh, you reversed
or a better life. I reversed you this time.
My advice on how to live a better life. You see, with the podcast, I'm collecting, I'm collecting data. I'm thinking about one day compiling all the people's answers and having a book, kind of like Humans of New York, with the pictures and everybody's answers. That's something I'm thinking about down the line.
That'd be great.
One thing that I'm trying to focus on and that I'm trying to improve is protecting one's energy, right?
I like that.
Setting boundaries with people. If you feel like some people are giving you anxiety, some people are, draining your energy. There's people I call the energy vampires. They just mooch off your energy. I'm sure you can relate. You spend a bit of time with them, and by the end of it, you're drained. You're like, you're an introvert, so I'm sure you like mega relate to this.
Yeah.
It's not easy, but trying to not be so reactive to everything. We're constantly reacting to things, and I'm saying this to myself as much as I am saying it to you or the audience, because I'm not perfect. These are things. I'm a work in progress. There's a lot I need to work on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's also very important to realize that it's all a process. There is no, one of my guests actually said this. She said that she was in the pursuit of enlightenment and she would travel the world and she'd do yoga in India. And then she went to this Buddhist monk and she saw this monk and, he looked at her one day and he said, do you think I put on this yellow robe and then suddenly I'm enlightened? He's like, no, every day I show up and meditate. Every day it's a pursuit of enlightenment. Every day it's not a certain point, but it's a journey. Protecting your energy. It's all about, setting those personal boundaries, which I'm working on, not letting, if you feel like sometimes you can't describe why, but certain people make you feel off, they make you feel anxious, they give you a bad vibe. And if that's how you feel, then maybe you should set certain boundaries to protect your own energy, because your energy is all you have at the end of the day. And if someone's affecting that, that's going to affect you. But if you're feeling good and you protect your energy, you have good energy, that will overflow and then that will affect people around you. So one of the things that I like to focus on is don't get caught up with too many things around the world, trying to change the world. When we're younger, when we're in university, we want to change the world and we want to do this and that's fine. And I respect that. But then you go through life and you realize, okay, maybe I need to work on myself first, and that's more powerful, because what do you have control over? It's your energy. It's yourself. If you start by focusing on yourself and if everybody does that, that will ripple to the people around you. And then the people around you, if they're feeling better and they work on themselves, that will ripple throughout society. And so I think, individual responsibility in the sense that, in the sense of focusing on oneself, your individual responsibility for yourself. You don't have to fix and I'll address mainly the young people because I had this mentality. You don't have to fix the world's problems. It's not your responsibility to fix everything. If you focus on yourself and bettering yourself just by, I wouldn't say consequence, because consequence is kind of negative, right? What's a positive way of saying? In fact, if you're able to take care of yourself and that positively affects the people around you, then it's the ripple effect. But that whole concept of trying to change the world, trying to take on these big causes, you know what I mean? I mean, I can name so many of them. Yeah, they're important, but I believe that change starts within.
I think it's the same thing as love too. If you love yourself first, it's so much easier to love other people. It sounds so cliche, but it's so true,
It is true. And that's, you know what? That's one thing that I mentioned on the podcast when I was having a conversation about modern dating and relationships with one of my former colleagues, co-hosts from the radio. And that's another good episode. It was we talked about his journey coming into radio, the truth, how it happened. On that episode, I spoke about a moment where I was going through a bad relationship, and I remember I was outside, and one of my cousins, he walked by, and he just imparted this. It was almost like a guru, he imparted this little bit of wisdom, and then he walked away, and it was sunset. It was very cinematic, but. He looks at me and is like, listen, a relationship is made up of two individuals, right? Two individuals that don't need anybody, that are happy on their own, and then together they're happier. And I never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
And that links to what you were saying. If you don't put in the work, if you don't take responsibility for taking care of this individual, then you won't be able to show up in other relationships. And that links to what you were talking about. If they're underpaying people like they do in radio and media, if you're underpaying people, you're not valuing people. This is why I walked away. I just didn't feel valued, and I walked away. Some people can't walk away. Yeah. And I understand that it's not easy, especially if this is all you know. If you're, not valuing people, if you're, you're not giving them time to recharge, to look after themselves, then they won't be able to show up and give you the best.
I know. It seems so like...
You would think they would have figured that out by now, but somehow the cycle keeps repeating itself.
And I think with the enlightenment thing too, a good point, what you were saying is that it's important for people to understand that it's a work in progress for everybody, that no matter how much it looks like somebody has it all figured out, nobody has it all figured out. It's a process for everybody every day.